We want to welcome you to this evening's webinar, which is entitled How to Get Your Elder Board to Act Like a Team. And Waypoint exists to help um, churches and leaders get on mission and stay on mission. It's one of the primary things that we do through all the strategic services that we provide to the churches throughout the Mid-Atlantic region within our family of churches. And so we want to welcome you here tonight. We're glad that you're here. And I want to, first of all, give thanks to our sponsor, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, who's a regional ministry partner here in the same footprint where we operate, and we're thankful for them. That sponsors our entire webinar series for the entire year. We really have the same mission in a lot of ways of helping churches in the region to do their mission given by God really well. And we know that this topic tonight is really in the heartbeat of who we're about, because we know that for churches to get on mission and stay on mission, it requires a great unified leadership team. And you can be disguised at times or kind of surprised when things are going well. You may not know how things are going underneath the surface, but whenever there is stress on your church, if the apple cart is upset in any way, it's going to expose the caliber and the cohesion of your leadership team very quickly. And so we want to talk about that tonight. So we're glad to have Dr. Jim Estep, who's going to be presenting for us here in just a minute. He's there with us. And I do want to tell you about a couple things before we get started, and as more people are logging in. First of all, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you've not been part of one of our webinars in the past. And that's obviously the question and answer. But the trick with that is for you to go ahead and type in any question that you have about elders or your eldership situation at your church as soon as you think of it. And it goes into a queue that we're able to see. And as we get near the end of our time tonight, we're going to be going just for 55 minutes. As we get near the end of that time, we will try and answer as many of those questions as we are able to. If we're not able to get to your question for any reason, we also receive a report of all the questions that are typed into the queue, and we're able to answer those after the fact. So go ahead and type in your questions as soon as you're able. That reminds me, you'll also receive a follow-up email in 24 hours at 8 o'clock tomorrow night that's generated by our webinar interface. And in it, there will be links to things that are mentioned tonight, specifically to some upcoming Waypoint events. The next two webinars, we're going to tell you the titles of those. But more important than that is, let's see if I can share this properly. But more important than that is going to be, we're excited to let you know that the E2 Elders team is coming to our region this fall. Again, we had them 3 years ago, and it was the largest event we've ever had. And so we want to invite you now, and I'm going to tell you this again at the end of the webinar, but on Friday in October, the last weekend of October, we'll be in Kernersville, North Carolina for the entire day. And then on Saturday, we'll be in Richmond, Virginia. And so you'll want to bring your entire elder team and your leadership team, that would include staff, to one of those two events. And there'll be a link to where you can register for those moving forward. And we would love to have you there. We had more than 200 leaders at those two events 3 years ago, and it was a great time for everyone that came there. So we want to invite you to that specifically. The other thing that I'll tell you about right now is the polling question that we have, as we're going to have a poll later on, but I'm going to drive a poll. Let me stop share right now and hit a poll. And the first poll is just to know how many people are joining us tonight, because typically, particularly with our elder webinars, there are several people per computer. And so for those that have already logged in here, if you would go ahead and chime in, we would love to know how many people are participating in our webinar tonight. All right. So we are just about done there. I will tell you, we have a number of partners with Waypoint Church Partners that help us do what we do. And one of the things that we do is to help start new churches in our Mid-Atlantic region. And I'm excited to let you know that we are starting a new church this coming Sunday on Easter in Midlothian on the south side of Richmond, Jacob's Well Church. And so thank you if you're a church that is already financially supporting Waypoint on a monthly basis, that you're helping us to do things like that to expand the kingdom in our region through new churches. And so we're hoping for a great day. I'm going to be there personally to see that. All right, so I'm going to end this poll here so we can kind of see who's with us today. And then I'm going to try and stop share. Oh, I think I have. All right, good. All right, so Jim, I want to welcome you from your home in Atlanta. And if you would just briefly tell us how long you've been with E2 Elders. I guess you're one of the founding directors of E2 Effective Elders, but then just launch right into your presentation tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Well, I'm really thankful for the invitation, just the opportunity to share. Yeah, I've been with E2 since the beginning, when it was literally an impromptu conversation over a picnic table in Heiligenkreuz, Austria. And only the Lord could have really, honestly, only the Lord could have done this. Gary Johnson, David Roadcup, and myself, we knew each other here in the States, but literally we all ended up at the same mission house the same week, not knowing we were going to be there. Being some of the only English-speaking people on the campus, we ended up sharing about what is the greatest need of the church, and we thought it really needs leaders. Well, if you're a minister, if you're a staff member, there's all kinds of ways to get an education, buy books, go to seminars and conferences. And we said, but the issue is our leaders, our elders of our churches, they don't have those kinds of opportunities to study and grow and fellowship and such. And then all of a sudden, Gary says, and that's when the Holy Spirit fell on us. I say that was kind of a Jericho road. We were at a point we could have said, yeah, somebody really ought to do something about that. And that's just really when the Lord got a hold of all three of us and said, when you get back to the States, what you need to do is gather. And so that was really the birth of E2. I've been with it since, like I said, the very initial conversation. And it's been, I'll be very candid. Once again, the Lord has opened so many doors beyond what we had even hoped to imagine. And we've seen it go from an idea to now really having 2 full-time people on staff and a lot of support and a board that's very supportive, churches that support our ministry. And we went from 1 book to I think about 9 now, as well as other resources. So just really appreciate what the Lord has done through it.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to share screen, and hopefully I will be able to pull this up. And before I even begin, if you would like a copy of this presentation, at the very end is going to be my email address. Write it down and simply shoot me an email and say, Waypoint presentation, and I'll be glad to send you a PDF of it. So that way, trying to take notes and such, you don't really have to worry about that. But when I talk about teams, immediately when we think about teams, what comes to mind is some kind of sporting event. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, so I'm a Wildcat fan, UK, Big Blue Nation. And the simple fact is I can remember my dad watching them on television, and they were just not hitting a basket, and they were just not performing the way we really thought they should be performing. And my dad would say they just weren't playing like a team. A team is something we really, really recognize when we see it. But when we say, but what made that a team? What was the difference? What was that qualitative difference about those 5 guys on the floor that moved them from being 5 guys on the floor to being a team that won the game? And so when it comes to elders, we often talk an eldership. But I'm going, yeah, but what would make it an elder team? And that's what we really need to get at, is we're talking about, building the elder team. First off, we're really talking about what are the dynamics that govern the unit. And I'm going to try to use the word unit as something so generic that it's just kind of like, here are the people we're talking about. Now, what are the dynamics that govern how they interact, what they do, what they're trying to achieve? And those dynamics actually determine what kind of unit they become. They may be a group, you may call it a committee, a task force, a work group, a board. I'm not interested in labels. I'm not interested in what you title it. I need to understand how does that unit of people labeled elders function with one another, and do they have the dynamics that really represent a team? So when somebody says, okay, what are the two governing dynamics of a unit, the two core, breaking it down into its simplest form, it's this: mission orientation and the unit's cohesion. Now, let me explain this. When we talk about mission orientation, a team knows its objective, shares that objective, and understands that's the purpose for which they are gathered. They have grasped onto the mission as a unit. Every individual has kind of peeled away their own agenda and accepted the mission. You see, this is what made the early church so dynamic, because when Jesus said, go and make disciples, all the apostles suddenly did what? Got on the same page. And they did that in Jerusalem, and then they didn't stop. They went to Judea and Samaria and the uttermost parts of the earth because they were very mission oriented. But there's something else, and that's cohesion. Now, we could easily say relationships, but I'm not just talking about, oh, we all like each other. We're not just talking about the absence of conflict. We're talking about that when we look around the table at the other people in that unit, we understand and value what each one of them brings to the table, how we fit together like a puzzle, how we are better together. I'll put it to you this way. Gary, David, and I are very different people. We all bring a particular strength to that E2 core team. And we have oftentimes sat there and said, if any one of us, any one of the three of us is absent from the meeting, it just doesn't go as well. Because, for example, Gary is a great visionary. He talks about mission. He keeps us on task. He's looking forward. He knows what comes next. I'm kind of the organizer. I'm the one that can put the wheels on the idea. And David Roadcup has been such a blessing to all of us because, you know, he has the years of experience and the vast amount of contacts, and he knows people, places, things to bring into the fold to make sure everything works smoothly. So we all three have cohesion because we understand we relate to one another. We've gotten into one another's friends, but more than that, we realize how for the ministry. And see, these are the two governing dynamics. How mission-oriented are you, and how cohesive is the unit? Those two factors will determine what kind of unit you are. Now, there are different types of units. For example, we could be a mass. When I go and visit Atlanta, I live just outside of it. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people driving their cars and walking the streets and getting on and off of buses. And it is just a huddled mass of people. They are not going in the same direction to the same place. They just happen to be in the same geography. Yeah, I have actually seen elder units that resemble a mass. Now, a little better than that is a crowd. Let's say we're all going to go to a Falcons game, okay? Well, now, at least we're heading to the same place, but I'll guarantee not all the Falcons fans are going to call one another or email or post online when we're getting there, how we're getting there, where we're sitting, because there's no coordination. It just so happens we're all heading in the same direction. But there's no real alignment. There's no real communication yet. We're still functioning as individuals. We just so happen to be going to the same place. Now, a group can define itself. Well, we formed a group. Great. We formed a group. So there's probably a little more cohesion, and there ought to be a little more mission orientation. But it's kind of like an underdeveloped team. It hasn't really developed a sense of direction and unity, the cohesion, the mission mindedness. It needs a little time, if you will, to cook. And oftentimes we, like my dad used to say, yep, those are five guys out on the court, and they're all playing with the basketball, but they're acting like a group, not a team. So all of a sudden, when you get those two core dynamics functioning at a very high level, you get a team. But if you don't put the brakes on, it is very possible to go a step too far. And a team can quickly degenerate into a clique, which we'll define in just a few moments. And by the way, the clique is when it tends to forget the mission and value the relationship so much that it forgets where it was heading. And so so when I say we need to talk about forming teams, this is not as easy as it may sound, because as you approach the team level of working together, the group takes on some of the factors of a team, but overemphasizes oftentimes the mission. We're all put on this unit to achieve this purpose. So we all know why we're in the unit, but we don't exactly know why each other's in it. We lack the relationship. That's why it takes some time to build. But if we don't put the brakes on when we do reach the team role, we finally have the dynamics of a team. It's very easy for us to huddle and say, okay, now we are the team and nobody else is. And so we become a clique and closed off to the outside, and we begin to liking to serve with each other so much that we forget the mission. We forget why we were put together in the first place. So let's talk a little bit about that. Mission orientation for elder teams. Let's talk just a little bit here. Let me give the illustration. If we were in a mass and there's the goal we want to achieve, we're going in every which way. If that's the governing dynamic of the unit, it's a mass. It's devoid of any purpose. By the way, crowds, well, they kind of align, but you don't really know which way they're heading. They do have to head the right way on the streets and on the roadways. So there's a little bit of order to it, but there's no directionality to it. You're going in whatever direction you want to go in. The group may be pointed in all the same direction, but they don't know how to stay in their own lane. They don't know how to relate to one another. They don't know how to value the other person's contribution. They're still kind of going, hey, I've got the idea here. I see the goal. I'm heading. But the problem is the other people in the unit are saying the exact same thing. We're all heading for the same goal, but we're not relating to one another well. So it's 8 individual agendas instead of one. And you finally get the team where there's a high level of orientation, where we are all pointing the same direction. We understand what each one brings to the table. We have a great deal of understanding with one another because we've developed cohesive relationships of respect and nurture and care for one another. And we've given feedback, and we understand, for the good of the team, I have to step back and let this other person take the lead for a little bit. Fantastic. We brought up basketball. When that one player has the shot but realizes the other player has a better shot and is willing to pass the ball. We understand one another's strengths, where we are on the court. Who can take the better shot is what's important, not whether I get to. That's a team. But you have to watch out, because it could be troublesome when the team kind of begins to love on itself instead of realizing it's being defined by its achievement, by its goal, and it becomes devoid of purpose again, like a mass. But they don't realize it because it's such a small little unit. But we're all happy here. And all of a sudden, the measure of success, instead of achieving the mission, becomes what? Well, aren't we all happy? Don't we all feel good about being here? This elder team's been together for 20 years. Why would we think about it adding anybody? Okay. So it is the governing dynamic, one of which is mission orientation. The other is cohesion. Now, it's very easy to say build relationships, but in a unit, it becomes a little more tricky. There's an actual formula for coming up with the number of relational bonds in any unit. And here it is. It's the number of unit members times that number minus 1, divided by 2 are the number of relational bonds going on. I see Tim here on the screen. So 2 of us times 2 minus 1, 1 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. There is one two-way relationship going on between he and I. Not bad. But what if you have 8 people on an elder team, on an elder unit? Then there's 8 times 7 divided by 2, and you have 28 two-way relationships to maintain. That's a lot of communication to guarantee is getting across. That's a lot of coordinating to do. That's a lot of, let's make sure this person gets voice because you've talked. That's a lot of cohesion to try and build into a group. And see, that's why it's not just a matter of mission, because what we're really saying is we're an elder team when we know one another, trust one another, rely on one another, recognize one another's strengths, giftedness, values, abilities, contributions, and we're putting it all at the feet of the mission of what was 2 factors: mission orientation and cohesion. When we can keep them in balance and improve them constantly, we develop a sense of team. So right now, I want us to do one of our first poll.
All right.
And Tim, if you want.
Yeah. Let's see here. Well, it's this one. There we go. And while people are reading this one, chiming in, which one do you guys have more difficulty with at your particular team? I want to remind folks, if they've got questions for Jim that we could answer later in the session, go ahead and hit your Q&A button as well and type in your questions. But which one do you have more difficulty, the mission side of things or the cohesion side of things? All right, we're halfway in. While you guys are chiming in, let me tell you that I could say this. Well, we're 75% in. We'll wait for a couple more responses. I will tell you, Jim, that I'm able to include in my follow-up email a link to the PDF of these slides so that everyone has the opportunity without having to email you directly. It'll be in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow. And we just need to put it in a Dropbox somewhere where they can grab it.
Okay. I can save it as a PDF and send it to you.
That would be perfect.
Okay.
All right. So it looks like I think I can, we got 80% chimed in here. I'm going to end that, but then I can share the results. It looks like the greatest group is the one that struggled with having mission focus. A few it's cohesion, a few it's balanced, and then another quarter of the people that responded said that they really struggle with both of them. So
Okay.
that's kind of informative for you.
All right.
All
And we
right.
are going to talk about some practical steps to take to bring balance to them. Okay.
Uh,
Um, Now, here's the thing when I say it's tricky to land on that team dynamic because you could end up accidentally overemphasizing one over the other. You see, when that happens, you end up with a group versus a team versus cliques. So, team is here in the middle. A group, okay, loses the unit cohesion. It doesn't seem to have the cohesion a team does. And when that occurs, everybody shows up, they've got their own agenda. Oh, I know we're all here to solve this problem or to address this issue or to work on this next step, and I know how to do it. Well, so do I. Well, so do I. Well, because there's no cohesion, you end up with multiple personal agendas, and eventually you're going to end up with essentially a dominant voice. One of those agendas, you're going to end up being mission focused, and it's my mission, not our mission, because you're loss of cohesion. And so you become a group because the dynamic governing you is not so relational. You're together because you were put together, and yes, you may understand what you're trying to achieve, but it seems like everybody has their own voice, and one person or two people become the dominant ones, and when the rest of us are just kind of stuck in the middle of the verbal fight between the two dominant voices. And I don't even want to see, because I can't see a show of hands. That would be quite the poll. Have you ever found unfortunately, the tug on the team to make sure those relationships are maintained? That means the chairman or the point person for the elders has to guarantee that a dominant voice doesn't arise, that somebody can't go, well, if I don't get my way, I quit. That's out of bounds. We don't do that. And challenge them. I mean, this is the point. If you're going to use the team dynamics, somebody's going to have to preserve and advance the relationships in the elder team, in the elder unit. What about the other direction? Well, you could become a clique. And that's really when there's a loss of mission focus. Ironically, the technical term for this, and sorry, I wish the term was different, but they call it group think. And when you ask them to define group think, what it says is, the group likes each other so much, they don't listen to anybody from outside the group. And by the way, if one person in the group begins to disagree, well, we never liked them anyway. They really didn't belong in here anyhow. And so all of a sudden, the group becomes self-policing, self-maintaining, but they're no longer achieving the purpose that they were designed to achieve. They've lost their sense of mission and think that gathering together and just being with each other and maintaining status quo, as long as the relationship is there, that's all that counts. And so once again, the team is that balance between these two that overemphasize one dynamic over the other. So what do you do if you're in a group? Well, there's this dominant voice. It's basically the individual, or I could say individuals versus the team. In other words, yeah, we're all in here, we all have this, and then one or two, maybe more, unfortunately, become a little Napoleon. And they want everything done their way. And because there's not a lot of cohesion, organization to the group, relationship, trust, it's difficult to get the dynamic of a team going. By the way, what makes that individual dominant? Well, by the way, I've served on a lot of different elder boards, elder committees, elder teams. I've been invited to visit a lot of churches. Basically, what happens is you have somebody who says, well, I was one of the founding members. I'm a charter member of this church. Okay. I give a lot of money to this church. All right. I give a lot of time to this church. Okay. If you'll notice in our church directory, a lot of the last names are mine. Okay. The point being here, they're trying to claim authority on grounds that typically aren't really good reasons to have authority. And so the dominant voice is someone who wants authority that they really haven't, if you will, earned. They've just been around longer, or their family is larger, or their checks are bigger. Nobody's saying they're qualified. Nobody's saying they're the expert. Nobody's saying anything of quality. It's just, I want to be the leader. It's the I versus we mentality, which, by the way, we see in Scripture. 3 John verse 9 talks about someone who always thinks of himself as first and always wants his way, even puts down the apostles. Philippians, the only book, by the way, in the entire New Testament written to elders. Notice it didn't say the only book to mention elders. I'm saying in the to line. It is to all the saints in Philippi and the overseers and deacons among them. It's the only book in the New Testament addressed to elders. And when you look at chapter 2, right after that great Christological passage where have this mind also in you that was in Christ Jesus, he says, be like Timothy, who puts the needs of others before himself. Or be like Epaphroditus, who actually suffered to the point almost of death to come and serve alongside with me. The point being, we see dominant voices and groups even in the New Testament, but typically they are not valued. In fact, it's the opposite that is. Those leaders who were sacrificial, who valued others, who understood their purpose wasn't their own gain. What about a clique? Well, it's when you have the team versus the mission. It's groupthink. It's we'd rather get along with each other and keep our friendship and our relationship than endanger it by actually it could possibly upset the apple cart. It's when we approach a decision. Think about it. We're the elders around a table, and we are approaching a decision, and there's information we need, but we're uncritical. We don't ask for the information. We just, we assume everything is okay. So there's a reckless abandon when we have to deal with the facts, because the facts are what we think are true, not what's necessarily true, because it's what the group wants to think is true. By the way, in the Oxford Dictionary, a term was actually added in 2016, truthiness. It's when you want to believe something because it sounds true, even if the facts are against it. I just want that to be true. It's where you resort to manipulation. Manipulation. It'd be really a shame if we decided not to have your Sunday school class because you're not kind of siding with us on this. Or it'd be really a shame if, fill in the blank. So you kind of resort to threat of breaking the relationship, because that's primary in a clique. The relationship defines us, not the mission. Theme eisegesis. We look at the data and we put the meaning into it. Exegesis is when we draw the meaning out of a text, like exiting. Eisegesis is when I've made my mind up, now I'm going to go to the Bible and put the meaning into it. But that can also happen with any data source. I'm going to look here and I'm going to find the reasons we're right, not be open to, hey, maybe something's changed. Maybe we need to take a fresh look and actually do something. A distorted self-perception. They tend to value themselves greater, the team greater than others. And therefore, they are very self-selecting on the information. The word groupthink, that phrase, actually originated in the early 1970s when Richard Nixon was in the White House. groupthink was used to describe what was happening inside the West Wing, because they would literally read the newspapers, and instead of handing the newspaper to the president, where he have seen all the editorials, and he would have seen all the opinion letters, and he would have seen the front page, his people were taking scissors and only cutting out the good stuff and handing them to him in a file. So Nixon thought, well, the newspapers love me. He wasn't getting the whole picture because they were selectively screening the information. Why? Because they valued one another. They were in a huddle. They were like wagons circled. They weren't interested in the facts, just in preserving that group. Once again, when an eldership takes on the dynamics of a clique, it doesn't bother to look at the budget or the financial situation as it makes decisions. It's what feels good to the unit that makes it right or wrong. And if people begin to get a little out of line, they're not exactly supporting the unit like they used to, threats are made. Unfortunately, I've seen this occur as well. Now, by the way, biblically speaking, Jesus encountered all of these different types of groups, all these different types of units. At one time, he was looking out at the masses who would come out, the crowds, the Bible says, came out to listen to him. But as he looked at we call that a mass. They came out for a common reason. But he began to see there were some men in that group that would make great leaders one day. They had the potential. And so from the crowds, from the masses that kind of pressed in on him, he drew these people. And they formed, a group. And they slowly began to get to know one another over a 3-year period. Think about it. They experienced life together. They began to develop a sense of we understand who each other is and the strength of one another and the shortcomings of one another and how we can rely on one another. And, at one point you go, okay, so they got the team, but there were threats. There were threats. You see, at one point, 2 people go up to Jesus, James and John, and say, what? Do us a favor. When you enter your kingdom, we just want to be at your left and right. We want to be dominant voices. We want to be in charge. Forget about the other 10. It's just the 3 of us, Jesus, right? The dominant voice. That would have turned the team into a what? A group. And Jesus had to look at them and say, no. This is not happening. A little later, what happens? Peter, James, and John, they go off with Jesus to a mountain. And Moses and Elijah appear, and they say, what? You don't have to go to Jerusalem to fulfill your mission, Jesus. All you have to do, let's build tabernacles. Let's put up tents, and we can just stay right here, huddle, worship you, be right here with the prophets. You don't have to go and do it. No. That's a clique. And Jesus was saying, no, we're not going to be a clique. We're not just going to stop here at the mountain and worship and never let me get to Jerusalem to fulfill the mission. Jesus knew what he was doing. He understood, I've got to get these men oriented to the mission I give them and working together to achieve it. So that by the end of Matthew, he can give them a great commission. So that as Luke ends his gospel, he can open up the book of Acts with the same event and say, and this is what happened. This is everything Jesus began to do and teach, because now the church was going to continue that mission. So there's a little bit of a dynamics chart here. Here we have the cohesion, the relationship factor. Here we have the mission focus, the orientation factor. Here is low, lower left-hand corner. There's high up there at the arrows. Well, if you have low cohesion and low focus, the dynamic of your unit, of your elders, is that more like a crowd. You may show up, but you're not showing up for any common reason. You really don't work with each other other than in that setting. You don't really know one another that well. By the way, this would be typified perhaps by an eldership that does, because there's nothing accomplished, or doesn't keep minutes, because we're just kind of gathering to go through the act. There's no mission focus. There's no cohesion. See you next month. Now, by the way, if you have a high, focus on a mission, but you're still over to the left, so you're low cohesion. Even though that mission may be from one person and not really owned by everybody else, but at least we're trying to do it, just half-heartedly, because we really don't believe in it. We're more like a group. See, I can make a group. I can get a group of people together, but that doesn't make them a team. I can even charge them with something. You have to accomplish this. But that doesn't make them a team, because it doesn't mean they've actually achieved it or moving toward it. You see, a team is when I have high mission focus and high cohesion. Notice it's further over toward the right, toward the high cohesion. See, that's when the team knows what we're trying to do and why I'm here and what I contribute to it. And I'm here because you're here and you contribute that. And together, we're moving together on a common mission. And by the way, you can be a clique if you have that high relationship, but low mission focus. Because then it's just a matter of we get together because we enjoy each other's company. But we really don't have any reason to get together. No overriding purpose. What do? Well, if you want to really facilitate mission orientation, a couple of things. First off, review your mission. I found that a lot of churches have it hanging on a wall, but they've not taken it out of the glass and read it and said, is this still relevant? Is this something we really are trying to do? And if so, how is what we're doing as a church aligned to it? One time my father was in the hospital. He passed about 8 years ago. He was in the hospital in Lexington at St. Joseph's. And as I was going down to get some coffee, I saw on the door of an Office of Mission Integration. Now, when I'm not serving with E2, I'm currently serving with a church. But for really 30 years, I've been a professor of ministry and education in several of our colleges. In fact, May 1st, I'm going to start as the academic dean at Central Christian College of the Bible in Moberly, Missouri. That's just in about 2 weeks. So my house looks more like a warehouse than a home. But the simple fact is I'm very keen. I teach classes on administration and on team building and on mission orientation and all those things. So when I saw that on the door, I just couldn't help myself. Knocked on it, went in, and I said, what does this office do? And they said very simply, any new idea that happens comes to this office, and they have to explain to us how it helps us achieve the mission of this hospital. And if it doesn't, it doesn't even get a hearing. It doesn't even get on an agenda. We're the gatekeepers. And I couldn't help but think about it. If everything we did had to contribute to the mission of the church, how much healthier would our congregations be? By the way, assess actions in light of the mission. Should we do this or this? Well, what does the mission say? what promotes it best. See, now it's no longer about my opinion versus his opinion or this idea versus that idea. It's, does it support the mission, and which one does it better? It makes it rather objective. It takes it out of the realm of personality and personal agenda and puts it toward, does it promote the agenda? But it just use it to inform your decisions, and watch out for those personal agendas. Well, done it. That doesn't always make it right. It might have worked 10 years ago, but it doesn't mean it works now. Assess your progress toward the fulfillment. You know what an elders meeting ought to do is update how are we moving toward achieving our goal. Is it done 50%, 75%, 80%? We're accountable to fulfilling the mission, not just each other, but to fulfill the mission. How are we doing? Are we making perpetual motion forward? Okay. So you can do a lot of things to help regain mission orientation. Review it, guard it, look at everything in your church and ask, how does it contribute to it? When you make decisions, which one promotes this best? And then guard against those personal agendas and assess your progress toward it. Are we really achieving this? Yes or no? Now, in terms of building relationship, socialize as a team. Do something other than show up to a monthly meeting. I know some elder teams that actually have dinner and prayer before the meeting. And that might take up an hour. But I'll be very candid. During that hour, they're sharing about life. They're sharing their personal stories, their personal struggles. They're praying for one another. They're forming deep spiritual relationships that aren't going to happen if we show up and say, well, we got a very busy agenda, so let's just skip prayer, jump right into it. And we don't take into account that we're people. By the way, I think it would be great if not just before a meeting, but if during the week, periodically, elders got together and prayed for one another, even like over the course of a month. Let's all go out and grab coffee. Why? Just to do it. Just to talk and to chat and to get to know one another better. Prayer time with each other. I serve at Heritage Christian Church in Fayetteville, Georgia right now, and our elders meetings start with at least an hour of prayer. Regardless of what else is on the agenda, we go over the whole church's prayer list. We talk about one another's lives. One of our elders right now has cancer. We've been in his kids. One of our elders, he's like, my son is having some faith issues, praying for him. See what I'm getting at? We know each other. We're actually friends together. By the way, take a strengths inventory. I've got any number of literally free inventories that simply talk about not just here's your personality type. It's, this is how you respond in a crisis. This is how you respond to a challenge. This is how you typically, and it's amazing how accurate they are. And so I've asked elder teams to take an inventory, get the results that are almost instantaneous, and just read the paragraph summary aloud to one another. And you know what it does? It is not embarrassing. I see teams laughing together because it's like, how did they get that? It's right. I just don't know how they got it. Okay. It's amazing how we already knew each other. We were just afraid to actually acknowledge it. Guard everyone's voice. One way to build cohesion, not just relations, is to make sure everybody in that unit speaks up and has the opportunity to speak, that one person can't shut it down. Because if you have that one person whose voice just, this is how it is, you're trending toward a group. You're losing the cohesion. So whoever's in charge of the meeting has to really work at guaranteeing everybody's voice. And this is communicate. Do not assume that everybody's on the same page. And big time, evaluate yourself as a leader. E2 does have some resources in some of its books, on some of its videos about evaluation. Just really quick, E2, how can we assist? We do have resources. Those resources are books, videos, other material. You can visit our website to see them. We do video consults. I have video chatted into elders meetings more than I would care to admit. Seminars, 1 and 2 day seminars, where if you say, can you come to our church? Or maybe there's a group of churches in the area and you go, can you come in and speak to all 3 of us on different topics, then maybe preach in one of them? Sure. Coaching and consulting. We prefer the title coaching. Consulting sounds like we arrive on the plane, we shake hands, we stay a couple of days, write up a report, hand it to you, take the check, thank you, and we fly home and we're done. None of us do it that way. It is a relationship building exercise where we are there for multiple sessions, sharing and talking, listening to one another, developing a plan, developing a strategy, checking back in with each later. So it's more like coaching. And then we do have partner congregations who support us as a mission. And as a supporter of our mission, we basically say we are on call to serve you in a variety of different ways because you're routinely supporting our mission. And so I know it's time for question, comments, and so clear up any kind of confusions, but I'll put this up there. That's a much better picture of me. But that gives you my mobile number. Now, I want you to think about this. I'm giving you my mobile. Why? Because it's about you. It's about ministry. It's about being a resource. And you've got to be able to get in touch with me. Just text or call. That's also my email address. By the way, we put our email addresses in our books because we want people to email us and follow up with questions, comments, confusions. Let us help. Okay, I'm going to keep that up there.
Thanks. And Jim, I'm going to include a link to your resources page on your website in the follow email tomorrow so they can navigate right to it from the email and take a look at the books and other resources that E2 elders have available. It's great stuff. We get emailed multiple times a month looking for resources for elders, and we send them directly to your website. So we're thankful for that. Let me share the screen here very quickly. We're about out of time. Yes, I'm going to kill yours. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And in just a couple minutes we have left, want to invite you either to join our next couple of webinars or to invite the people at your church that will be most interested in them, or both. And so the one that's coming up next month is we do 2 safety team webinars per year, and the one coming up next month is we do a lot of stuff for the security side, but this one's about the safety side. And so we have a church planter in Virginia here who is the preacher of a fairly large church, but also happens to be the fire chief for his part of the county. And so he's going to speak to us both as a preacher and as a fire chief on all the things that you would not expect you need to take care of at your church to make sure your people are safe in your own facility. And so that'll be coming up on Monday, May 20th. And then the following month, we've got one, let's see, and that says safety, but it's pastoral care, there we go, this one is new for us, dealing with pastoral care. And this was asked if we could do something on this, and it's specifically how pastoral care for churches is changing. Back when I was a kid, if someone was sick, or the preacher would go visit their home. And now the preacher does not go visit their home because no one wants the preacher to come to their home. So how do you take care of people in 2020 versus 1970? And the changes and the challenges of taking care of your flock in a changing culture. And so it's going to be a fascinating conversation. Neil Wheeler, the director of Leader Care, that's on staff at Waypoint, is going to be leading that with a panel of other ministers in our region that are trying to find creative ways to make sure their congregation, their flock, is properly cared for. And then finally, I want to remind you that we would like you to join us in person for a one-day session on stuff just like Jim shared. That was worth the price of admission. Jim, for what you gave tonight, even though they didn't pay a dime, that was great stuff. And to be able to get a whole day of that, particularly with the team, because I'm going to tell you, if you haven't figured this out, if you can bring your team to one of these 2 days, you get both sides of what Jim talked about. You're going to get how does your team
Yeah.
become focused, but just the fact that you go in a van together and spend a day together out of town is the cohesion part. And so just this is a great 1-day event to get your elder board to act as a true team with the dynamics that Jim described tonight. So we hope you'll come to one of those 2. It'll start at 9 o'clock, so if you have to get up early and hit the road, guys like to get up and brag about how early they had to wake up to get there, get your coffee and donut, hit the road. And so we hope to see you either in Kernersville, North Carolina on the Friday session or in Richmond, Mechanicsville, Virginia on the Saturday. And so we want to thank you for being part of our webinar tonight. And we really hope you'll invite other people at your church to join our future webinars, but also be on the lookout for the email that comes out tomorrow that'll give you links to the slides, the PDF of the slides, as well as resources, and these the links to these upcoming webinars. So we hope to see you next time, and we hope you enjoy your evening. Thanks a lot, Jim.